Hello and welcome to Circle Passages in Higher Ground. Like Ed Sullivan used to say, we have a really, really big show for you today. And co-hosts, rather than guests, Pat and Heather. And welcome, and this is exciting each time we've done this, which I guess this will be the third, where it's really the two of you. So it's climate we're going to be talking about today, right? And we're going to pass the baton to you, ma'am.
Okay. Yeah, and I was going to say, these are the best props we've ever had. So I get to not attack anyone, but cover Tolkien. And so part of the lead into this I'm going to say is a hobbit sword, and look, it has an exciting face on it. But this concept of a catastrophe and a eucatastrophe. So we are in a time, and Tolkien and Frodo, that great scene where Frodo says, "I wish it need not have happened in my time," and Gandalf says back, "So do I, so do all who live through such times, but it is not for them to decide. What we can decide is what we do in the time that we have." And so that's kind of a theme, and this eucatastrophe, hence hobbit sword. Frodo's a hobbit, if anybody missed that. Is, okay, we are under siege, in a sense, from environmental issues, and we may feel all different ways. It's almost like the stages of grieving, I think, in terms of ecological grief and grief in all different ways right now. So we may be angry, we may be frightened, we may be despondent, all of these different things. But the movement of a catastrophe into a eucatastrophe, hopefully people have read or seen the movies, but when all looks dark, when it's like the light at the end of the tunnel has been turned off to save electricity, it looks like it's a catastrophe, and then it's like the new dawn, the new hope comes. And if anyone's watched the movies or read the books, it's like Gandalf with the Rohirrim, with the sun rising and the cock crowing to save the day. And so it's like, what can we do with the time that we've been given? And we're a little bit like hobbits. We may not want to be called like Bilbo. Gandalf comes and calls him to the heroic journey. But who else is there? Bilbo keeps saying, surely there's someone better, and we all feel that way, but it's really something that we can do. And so I'm going to say that we're all called to adventure with my perfect prop, to do what we can in the time that we're given, because that's all that we can do. Buck.
Are we running out of time? Perhaps.
Perhaps.
With climate and everything that's taking place, that very first show that the two of you did really outlined kind of like what's taking place, right? And
do you want a bear skull?
Eventually hopefully we're going to get there. Well, hopefully we're not going to get there, but like you said, the time that we're given. But it seems to me that with what's going on with climate it's about us, the biggest perpetrators, people, and what we're doing to the planet, if you would. So to me, it kind of comes down to one word, is arrogance. We all feel so, especially in the industrialized countries, so entitled. I want what I want when I want it, and that goes with, as far as energy goes, let's say, fossil fuels, whatever it might be that's running my car. Of course, electric cars that are on the scene and have been, but hopefully yes, you've got one yourself. But again, the resources, and we think it's supposed to be there for us, but it doesn't seem like that's happening. And I'd like to do something. I'm going to borrow from your dad this idea of so here this represents toilet paper is Earth. So as you can see, pretty good size piece here, and so 363 sheets, and 362 of these really represent, if you would, is the formation of the Earth planets, excuse me, the planet obviously forming, but land, water, animals, plants are showing up, so that's the bulk of this. And this very last sheet, which, as you can see, this is us, people. And what we've done since we've shown up, which is relatively short period of time compared to what's been taking place for eons, as we know, right? And that's more the science piece of it. But what, this one right here, people, what we're doing to this right here is just amazing. So, you know, kind of takes me back to the arrogance again of, because of our own needs and comfort, all that sort of thing, we're destroying this right here. This won't go away, but this could happen, and that's where we might end up with one of your other props here, this call. So.
Yeah, and it's also the time we've been given. You know, we live in the Anthropocene where we are creating the climate and we are creators in a sense. But it's the time that we've been given. So what I like too is that we created the problem, and through the same actions, which are a lot of individual actions, you know, it's not a one-point solution. We can also solve the problem. And I know, Pat, you have that, the answer is in the solutions in the problem.
And understanding the problem, yeah. And so, and I think that's really important. One of the other things that we talking about today is just, you know, we were talking about the different feelings that fall into the area of grief. But for us adults, there's also
Guilt.
Responsibility and guilt, because it has happened during our watch. So that's, and then there's, for the young people, there's a lot of anger. So one of the things we talked about doing today is sort of asking that question, how could this happen? How could people let this happen? And you can say that with two ways. One way is just that how the youth is asking, it's like, how did you let this happen? You know, and with a lot of anger. But the second way is to ask it, come back to the same question again, and this time, and not to say that the anger isn't justified, absolutely.
And they're not allowed to express it, which I think is the eternalization in anxiety and depression. I would just put that in there because the,
so go
the
right
youth
ahead
I
and
see
ask it
would
angrily.
like to say it, but they don't.
Yeah, but so you're totally in the right to say it angrily. But we're coming back to look at it and say, what if we said it as curiosity? It's like, how did this happen? And so, and then when you get to that, then you fall into sort of the area that we've been talking about is that, so I have been working on this for a very long time, and I've been through my angry periods. I've been like on a lot of this sort of thing. So I thought, I ended up, my prop was giant postums, which is a joke among all of us because every time I show up for a meeting with us, it's like notebooks with postums falling out of everything. So these are giant postums. So I thought I would put up 3 things that have kind of helped me through it. And then we could all sort of throw in our bits about this. But the first one is, and mostly it's like, how do we approach this? How do we look at it? So if we go back to Tolkien, in that Tolkien it was described as evil. You know, but we're coming back to look at it and saying, is it truly were people truly evil, or is this really a bit of ignorance? And it's actually much more tolerable and useful because what do you do about evil? But ignorance, you know what to do about that. In fact, that's the basis of all that we've been doing was to say, okay, ignorance, it's education. So, and I put some notes up there. So basically what it is that it's kind of this idea of being ignorance of the fact that we are a part of nature. And I used to work at a children's museum, and one of the things that, I think the thing that was most surprising to me was how many children didn't think they were an animal. And adults too. I mean, there were plants and animals, and then there were human beings, and they actually had a separate category for that. And that, to me, reflects this whole concept that we're just plain not a part of nature. We are somehow separate from that. And so one of the things that we talked about a lot was when you're here, so this is something I read yesterday, that in size, to talk about perspective, in size we're halfway between an atom and a star. Now reality, which is out there, and it's physics and chemistry and ain't going away, and it's gonna, I mean, it's what we're really dealing with. You can have many ideas, but reality is is based in the sciences. There's other realities too, but what's happening on our planet is that way. So here we have human beings, and we tend to look at the whole problem from just our size and our perspective. And when we started doing this work, one of the things that Heather and I noticed a lot was is that what we were teaching was a lot about what was going on the atomic scale. And so when you're down to molecules and atoms, then you discover that when I breathe out, so if I breathe out the air and the molecules, I breathe out in that one breath, a year later, we'll be in every plant and animal on this planet in the northern and southern hemisphere. So we are not, you know, you always think the web of life, I eat you or you ate me. We are commingled. Our body parts and the parts of everything else are constantly changing. But that's a reality here. And when we drive a car down the street, we're not seeing the carbon dioxide coming out of the back. We don't see the trees breathe out oxygen to us. We don't see ourselves breathing out oxygen to them. And so we thought that that would work really well for art. You know, and then we also did a lot of perspective, which is there's a lot of grief associated to facing up to the reality of it. And one of the things that was extremely helpful for me was to go back and look at a time and a scale much larger than I was used to looking at. So we were just talking about this before we started, that whole thing from the Big Bang to now, and just to see how this flows in constant change. So that was
and
our
even
first.
looking at stars, I get in the hot tub at night, and looking at stars, you're looking back in space and time, and you're seeing a different scale, you know, albeit from your eyes. But I find that really affirming and peaceful. You know, I mean, it takes me out of this realm, in a sense, and yet it's human vision.
And it's also, and I think emotionally, it's really wonderful. And the other thing is that it allows you to understand things that we've talked about. For example, when we were talking about the planet, which this would be the scale of the solar system, that this is our third atmosphere. And that the original atmosphere was just outer space, the second one came out of volcanoes, but that the third was created by life. And the point we were trying to make with that was that if our atmosphere is made by us, well, it can be totally altered by us. And our scale of our activity, not only the growth in our population, you know,
8 billion.
Yeah, when you were talking about your little piece of paper, we started off with 1,200 people. We're now 8 billion people on that little piece of paper. That is a huge time. And we're not only 8 billion people, but we're 8 billion people with machines. And I think we talked about this once. It's like we went into the woods to build a home, and we did everything by hand with this little teeny wheelbarrow, day after day after day. And one time we got enough money to hire a guy with a backhoe, and I was just in shock. I mean, what one person could do with a backhoe was, you know, and so you put that on a global scale, and the impact we're having is just incredible. So.
And it's what that, just like we are spewing out, what that equipment is spewing out. That's the thing right there, right? Because like we're saying, Industrial Revolution probably over 100 years ago, but as you pointed out, it's really this generation right here and our parents that biggest causes of, you know, just really escalating. Technology has just taken off. You know, it's wonderful in some ways, and other ways it's kind of leading to our mess, isn't it? Because all the stuff that, the residue, everything that comes out of having that luxury, that the technology. So I kind of wonder sometimes too, and it's going to go back to the skull series. So the Big Bang theory is, are we moving to the implosion, the big implosion? So yeah, as far as people are concerned, you know, are we kind of wiping ourselves out because we're destroying the things that nature has provided us to protect us? But people are kind of tearing that apart, aren't we? Yeah. You know, you sent something the other day about Antarctica and the ice melting, and we're seeing this in so many different situations, right? So, you know, it's kind of like, and that's where I said, buy some property in Denver, because that's going to be the seashore before you know it, as the water levels rise.
The beauty, though, and I'm going to go back to the kind of the polarity of this, the catastrophe and eucatastrophe, is that it's become visible. So what was invisible, because it was incremental, has become visible. Like climate change
the impact,
is so in our face in terms of cause and effect that I think the positive part of that is just as crisis is opportunity or a change or turning point, that's where hopefully we're at the catastrophe becoming eucatastrophe, where we see it, and seeing is believing, like a seeing makes that impact. That's part of why we've worked with art. And to inspire. So not only to give people information, but inspiration about, hence the Hobbit sword. Like, we can do this. Just as we did it in the negative sense, we can do it in the positive sense, including, I think, technology in terms of carbon sequestration. We shouldn't not do what we can do in the time we're given, but also technology has a positive potential as well in terms of potential offerings. So I'm gonna put my eucatastrophe back out there.
Well, and so I would say that kind of falls into this whole idea of respond and react, and a lot of it has to do with emotions, and so when I realized this one was that, so I had been working on a project and I had wanted to buy an electric car, and my husband had made all of the arrangements, and I think he likes to research it, so I said, okay, well, it's like to find me an electric car. Yeah, go. So he comes back and he goes, okay, Sunday night, this is Saturday night, Sunday night we're going to drive down there because Monday you're getting your electric car, and all of a sudden, so I reacted, and all of a sudden I started going, wait a minute. What is it about the Congo and there's children, digging out lithium? And it's like, I literally freaked out. And I'm a Buddhist, and so I'm kind of really proud of the fact I can take major hits. And I'm watching myself and I'm going, oh no, this is not upset. This is totally freaked out. And so I start going on the internet, and and there's the lithium, and there's the carbon, and then there's the copper that you use to put the thing. So I am losing it basically and don't know what to do. And then all of a sudden I sort of look at myself and I go, okay, what's happening here? It's like, you need to get it together and you need to respond in some logical way. So I go online, so I call up, I email the people from the climate people in Olympia, and I had been to their electric car shows, and I sent her an email saying, I've been to your electric car place, and now I'm thinking about, I'm on the cusp of buying this thing, and I'm really upset. And so she sent me these two people to call, and I ended up calling Thad Kurtz, who's a very knowledgeable person in our community, and he looked at the car that I was driving, and it turns out that the car that I got has something where it's called a chain, and they have looked at where every single part in the car has come down to every single thing in the car. It's entirely vegan for one thing, except for some little oil on one part in the car, but they know where absolutely everything came from. And so it's really fascinating because there are legitimate sources of lithium, I discovered, that aren't mined that way. And but anyway, so it was really interesting, and it was a very good lesson for me about, and I think that's part of what you're saying is to deal first with the emotions, but then you have to start to really, you have to respond and not just react. And so many people, I think, get caught in reaction mode. And I have this little quote here. It's too small, so I'll read this one. It says, your people's first response is, please tell me this is not my responsibility. And Paul Farmer, who passed recently but was a marvelous person, he says, and that delay is lethal. And so when we talk about response, we mean you do something.
Right.
So response is not like, I'll think about it. It's an action. So the idea is that to get curious about it and remember that the answer is in the problem, and also that there's a lot of people that will help you. And so I was able to call a community of people who were really knowledgeable about that. And then when I wanted to do solar panels to drive my solar car so I would drive on sunlight, I found an ex-high school teacher science teacher who has a solar energy business, and he taught me all about it, and we went through the whole process. So it's both just look for it, but look for people. You always have a community that will help you to respond to something rather than just react. So.
Right, and I also think there's almost something of a stasis, like the analysis paralysis.
Yes.
So one of the things, because I'm on my third Prius, and my next will be an electric car, or whatever we've got that's the best at that time. So nothing's perfect, that we make as a species. Like nature may be perfect, we're a part of nature. We don't quite have that creation thing down yet. So, but we have to respond. We have to act, and I think love is an act. You know, I mean, so for me, I framed it as I'm investing in new solutions and new technology that aren't perfect yet, but that are moving in the right direction.
Yeah.
And then, so part of it, it's almost like framing it, but also not getting caught in that stasis of analysis of like, I can't do anything because it's not perfect.
Because The Guardian had a wonderful article about all the problems with the things that you need to electrify the system. But that just means those will be our next problems. You know, we still have to make the transition, and in somewhere we have to say, when we make it, just like you're saying, we'll look at those problems and then see if there's a way to kind of like bypass those. But I'm glad you brought up love, because so being an educator, when I talk to people about working on things, and when we were talking about hope and hopelessness, so I did a number of years human rights work, and a lot of the cases would be classic hopelessness, and then sometimes would actually work out, and that was a really interesting lesson. But hope, in a way, sort of suggests, we say, well, we have to have hope, and it's like it sort of suggests, well, we have to know that there's a possibility that this could work out, and maybe know how it will work out. And what's the Native American thing that says, basically you go through life walking backwards. You can see the past really clearly. You have no idea. And I would say, never in my life, 72 years, have I woken up every morning to read the paper expecting to see something I totally don't expect. I'm just like totally out of the blue. We just never know what's next. So they can be positive as well as negative. But so what I've come to think now more is that we ought to do things out of love. And so that if you love the planet, and I have a great quote by Chief Dan George, and he says, how can you just love part of this world? So it's like, if you love your cat,
right.
Or you love yourself. It's like,
Just part of it.
Yeah, exactly, exactly. Yeah, how can you just love part of the world? So if you do things from love, not only can you bypass having to explain to people what you think will happen or argue with them over it, but all those arguments that you have with yourself. So in the end, you ask the question, and I used to always say about the prisoners, so here's this person in prison, we may not get them out, we may not die. What are our two choices here? This person's in prison and nobody cares and nobody tries, and he dies. And this person is in prison and people care and they try and he dies. It's like, so give me these two scenarios. I'll take this one any day. This one has a heart, you know. That one has no heart, you know. So I think that the options of not trying, whether it's successful or not. And so if you bypass that, you get a lot of energy that you don't spend on those issues, you know. Emotions are huge users of our energy.
Right.
So that brings me to, we always have like, I have
more sticky notes.
I have them all over my wall, and I thought, I'm going to bring the one that I have over my wall. I noticed Cristina Friguentes had said, she had a quote that said, impossible is an attitude, not a reality. And so I brought two I thought were really lovely quotes. So this one is, try not to do anything with my mic here. This one, so this is the one I have in my room. It says, I just came up with it one night and I had to get up out of bed and go and write it down. Don't run, so this is my thing, don't run away from reality, but don't pick a fight with it either. And you know, that has helped me enormously, because I really am willing to read those articles, willing to face everything, but I don't have to go through an emotional fight every time I do it. I know who I am, I know what I'm doing, and more bad information does not necessarily affect that one way or the other. Hopefully good does. And then this part, which I thought was lovely, because I'm often off track, and I was supposed to be reading about this topic we were going to talk about when I was on the train. And instead, I read this Buddhist book, and it turned out to be all about this topic. It was just marvelous. So it's a fellow named Vimalakirti, and he was at the time of Buddha. And he was a very interesting character in the sense that he was like a householder who looked at what did it mean to be a Buddhist. But he says, whoa, there it goes. The world's healing, we were wondering about that. The world's healing in which I have an infinitesimal and essential part. The world's healing is my healing. Sorry, I left that one out, may last. In which I have an infinitesimal, sorry, that's not going to work. Okay, no problem. I'll hold it here.
There you go.
An essential part. And so this was one of the things that we've talked a lot about, is that the problem is similar to non-point pollution. Non-point pollution of Puget Sound starts with everybody's cat and dog in everybody's backyard. So when you work on it, there's not a big machine that solves it or anything. It has to be solved in many, many, many places. That's why they call it non-point.
There's no pill.
Yeah.
There's no single pill.
Yeah. It's got to take place in infinitesimal amounts, but that's the essential.
And it's how we created the problem.
Exactly.
And that's where I love it, because it's like, okay, we created this, we can actually solve it. And I know there are tipping points and there's exponential aspects and things like that, but also that nature has a homeostatic balance. We are a part of nature. In theosophy and different things, they call it the heresy of separation. You know, to imagine that we're on this planet and yet somehow we're separate. And yet we are inextricably intertwined. Of course, our healing is the planet's healing, and if the planet is sick, we are sick. So I love all of that, and I guess my favorite part is really almost like a time lapse backwards. You know, if we created it, we can solve it in as many small actions, you know, but conscious and from love at this point.
Yeah.
So is the reality that we're looking at 2023 desperation at this point? Or?
Have we got to the bears? Is that what you're saying?
Well, it seems like we're moving in this direction if we continue on the path that we're on, as far as the caretakers of the planet.
The time that we've been given is, I often think of it as a runway with a cliff, you know, and so we have less runway, but it's essential that if we don't have love, we're all lost. But I also think we do need some hope. And so that's where I really believe in the resiliency of the planet. You know, like the ozone is going to be healed in 40 years? Or,
right,
you know, I mean,
right.
So there's an ability for this homeostatic balance. We can't count on it. We have to do what we can. And I guess I'm also in love with hope.
Well,
not that I'm not going to act anyway. Yeah. And I want, especially for the youth, you know, to have hope. And honestly, love of our children, like with the nuclear age, it was like Russians loved their children too. 7 generations, you know. I just saw my grandnephew. You know, how can we not do it, if not for ourselves, for the children? That's
and you can redefine hope as, you know.
Yeah.
So what's his, Václav Havel, the president of Czechoslovakia, he defines hope as the goal exists beyond the horizon.
Yeah.
He says attaching to something that's a very long. He has a beautiful,
like a
beautiful
dream,
lens.
like yeah. Martin Luther King's "I Have a Dream." Mm-hmm. You know, to me it would almost be like a vision quest, to have that dream, to have that hope.
And you know, we were talking about just the empowerment. It was one scientist that both invented the stuff in the refrigerators that did in the ozone and put lead in gasoline. So it's like, so there's one guy with two bad ideas. It's like, there's one scientist we wish had never been born. But when you think about that, all we got to do is find another scientist with 2 really great ideas.
Yeah.
You know? It's like, so I mean, you know, it's like, so when you work on those things, they really can turn on a dime. I mean, you know, if someone, so right now we're all hung up on not the solar or anything like that, it's the battery. And there's people everywhere working on batteries, and so somebody's going to come up with a way to store energy that's a little bit cleaner than what we've got so far. It's interesting.
And I do believe we're at a tipping point in terms of that crisis as opportunity, that it's in our face enough that we see it. At least a critical mass recognizes or realizes the problem.
Which is, you know, really interesting, because this morning I was just reading a book, and it was by a guy from MIT. It was written 15 years ago. I looked at the copyright because I was curious, and the cover said, if Obama reads only, and this must have been the beginning of his administration, pretty much in there. If Obama read just one book about the climate, this is when he should read. But this guy from MIT, Tyler Volk, I think his name is, but anyway, he has this line in there, and he says, there goes my post. So we've been talking a lot about the Keeler curve, and the Keeler curve is the measurements in Mauna Loa of the amount of carbon in the air, and you can just watch it go up like this. And one of the points we make is that everyone thought it was just going to be like the Mona Lisa, everybody would know it. And this line comes out, and the scientist says, look, the Keeling curve will be on the news every night. Every single person on this planet will know this curve in
Only
the future.
if it kills someone. Okay, so.
But it's really interesting because in doing this and educating people on it, we are now 15 years later, and we have not met a person yet who has known what the Keeling curve is yet. So we're looking for that person.
Right. Yeah.
So education's a lot, you know.
And something we've talked about is kind of like moving ahead with what discussion is having some youth involved and getting their perspective, right?
Yes.
Because really, that's who's going to be taking over fairly quickly, already are, and hopefully, and it's encouraging to see that youth is stepping up, and those who are able to vote, really making the most of that and finding issues, finding the people who will support the issues of let's kind of save this planet if we would, right?
Yeah, the last 3 elections, the youth have come up big and I think are very informed and way more aware of the interconnection.
I think way more in touch with reality than our generation.
Yeah.
Yeah, I would say. And hopefully they see the power that they have,
Yeah.
because they do have the power. They do have a lot of power.
And hopefully, I do believe this is a mom and a baby. I'm going to bring the bears in. Look, I even know how to, I don't even know if you can do that, but look how cool the fusing of their skull is. That's my favorite part. But so they're mom and baby bears on the land, but for our children, how many generations, even though it's one toilet paper piece, the time we've been given, how many generations, and to have that longitudinal, sustainable life. My children believe they won't, or believe we're on track to not have a habitable planet. So I am seriously motivated. I believe this is a mama bear in my belief system, at least. And who's more protective than a mother bear? So for me, my major motivation is for the children, for future generations. And it has to do with love and hope, but it also is what you have to do what you have to do. Like once you realize it, you have to act. And I know we were talking about responsibility and how some people are like, drat, I see it, now I'm responsible. Yeah.
But I would say too is like, what you're talking about is still on this scale. I mean, it's like, so we could put a baby and their baby and their baby and their baby, but this is still things that, if you're talking with other people, I think this is a wonderful thing to talk about is our generations. So I've got grandchildren, but it's, that's going to be their life. It's the world.
So can I offer, can we move in our next show or two of bringing in some of the other folks that are being affected by this as well, but again, the youth. And I'd like to, if we can wrap up, I don't mean to just cut us off or anything like that, but really appreciate everything, that the energy that both of you have put into what we've talked about today, what you've talked about today, and definitely what we've got right here and so much more, right?
And we should say, if people, the first one we did is really an interesting, and we've sort of said to people, if you want to show it to friends, it's now, there's now located on the YouTube, that we're happy to meet with you on Zoom and answer questions people have or talk with them, or it's a wonderful way to create a community to talk about things and also spread the word. There's nothing more important you can do than to share information.
Definitely. It seems like those wheels are turning.
And we're trying to get that started now. So,
which is great.
So that's an invite to everyone out there.
Yeah.
Yes, well,
Come
it
and
is
see us.
for everybody, that's for sure.
Watch that show because it was helpful. People have said that it really helped them understand what it is, and that helps. I think that helps, and then you can figure out what your part of it is.
Absolutely.
And our theme, on my little end, because I'm going to bring up my magic sword again, our thing was to enchant people. And what I love about Tolkien, is things can be dire and you can be besieged, but we have so much within us, so much power. If a hobbit can do what they did, we can save the world. And so that energy of inspiration, of enchantment, who doesn't want to be a hero and go on a hero's journey? So,
And
There you
that's
go.
what this
Now's
is.
our
I
chance.
think we
Yeah.
said that this is a hero's journey.
yeah.
And on that note, how about if we close for today?
Thank
Thank
you,
you.
Beck.
No, thank you
Thank you.
both. And thank you for tuning in. And stay tuned for the next
Future.
episode. Huh?
Future with
Yeah,
the
thank you.
Thank you.
people from the future.
Yeah.